Imagine waking up to find strangers on what you thought was your private beach. This is the unbelievable story of how my dream home became the center of a real estate scandal. It started out like a scene from a dream. I had finally saved enough to purchase my perfect beach house, nestled on a secluded stretch of shoreline that promised private access to the sand and sea. For years, I imagined quiet mornings, the gentle lapping of waves, and the kind of privacy that made every day feel like a getaway. But little did I know, my personal paradise was about to become the epicenter of a scandal that would shatter my trust in the very community I'd chosen to call home. It was a breezy Saturday morning when I first noticed something was off. I had just brewed my favorite cup of coffee and settled onto my deck, looking forward to the sunrise. Out of nowhere, my peaceful reverie was broken by the sound of footsteps and soft chatter. Peering out the window, I saw a group of nearly 20 strangers casually strolling down my private path to the beach. At the head of the group was Mrs. Reynolds, the newly elected HOA president, her blonde hair bouncing as she pointed animatedly toward a freshly installed wooden sign that read, "Seacliff Shores Residence Beach Access 8 a.m. to sunset." My heart pounded. I rushed outside, coffee mug still in hand, and called out, "Excuse me, but this is my private property." The group turned to me, a mix of surprise and irritation on their faces. Mrs. Reynolds offered a tight smile, extending her hand in a gesture that was more about control than welcome. "Good morning, I'm Diane Reynolds," she said, as if this were just a friendly neighborhood meet and greet rather than the beginning of a property dispute. I explained, calmly but firmly, "I own this path. I have the deed right here. I built it myself and maintained it for years." Her smile faded slightly as she replied, "Our records show that this has always been community property. We're just making it accessible for everyone." The words hit me like a tidal wave. I had paid extra for that secluded access, and now the HOA, led by someone who claimed to represent all residents, was turning my private sanctuary into a public thoroughfare without my consent. That afternoon, I scrambled to find my property documents in my home office. As I pored over the survey maps, my pulse raced. There it was in black and white. The path from my home to the high water mark was unmistakably within my boundaries. There was no easement or any hint of shared access noted. Determined, I documented everything with photos and even managed to retrieve security footage that clearly showed Mrs. Reynolds and two men installing that offending sign early that morning when I least expected it. Over the next few days, the situation escalated. The HOA board, in what they claimed was a unanimous vote, insisted that the community had the right to use the path. I received fines for removing the sign, and soon after, a flurry of HOA notices arrived, one warning me that unauthorized signage and interference with HOA operations would lead to daily fines. I was caught in a nightmare. The very people meant to serve the community were overstepping their bounds, and they were doing it openly. On the day of the HOA meeting, I clutched my property survey and joined the throng of residents gathered at the community center. Mrs. Reynolds was there, confidently presenting slides that showcased what she referred to as community improvements to the beach access route. As she pointed out the new plans, benches, picnic areas, even a proposed graduation party set to be held on what was clearly my property, I couldn't help but interject, "This isn't a community feature. This is my private property. And you have no right to make changes here without my approval." The room fell into a hush and murmurs filled the air. Some residents looked shocked, while others remained suspiciously silent, their eyes darting between me and Mrs. Reynolds. I could feel the weight of their doubt and confusion. One neighbor, a kindly older gentleman who'd lived in Seacliff Shores for decades, spoke up. "But my family always thought the path was for everyone. I mean, it's been used that way for years." I explained, "That's because no one actually built it until I did. I invested my time, my money, and my heart into creating that path for the promise of privacy and tranquility." As the meeting wore on, tensions reached a boiling point. Mrs. Reynolds attempted to sidestep the legal specifics by dismissing my documentation as mere paperwork, while the atmosphere grew increasingly charged with anger and disbelief. Then, an unexpected twist unfolded. One of the longtime residents stepped forward with damning evidence of his own. He revealed that, Contrary to the HOA's claims, there was never any recorded community easement on my property. His testimony corroborated what I had discovered in my own research. This was not about improving community access, but about a carefully orchestrated plan to seize private property under the guise of communal benefit. I later learned that Mrs. Reynolds had been working in cahoots with Coastal Developments, a well-known real estate firm. The HOA had secretly allocated funds for what they claimed were community enhancements, but the permits and documents didn't add up. In a conversation with a trusted friend who happened to be a real estate attorney, I discovered that the project wasn't meant to benefit the neighborhood at all. It was a lucrative land grab designed to transfer ownership of my beach path to a development plan for luxury condos. That revelation sent shockwaves through our community. Protests erupted outside my home, led by residents demanding transparency and justice. Mrs. Reynolds, however, was unfazed. With a calm yet chilling demeanor, she maintained that everything was in order and that I was merely a troublemaker standing in the way of progress. But the evidence was mounting. I compiled email exchanges, building permits, and even discovered a folder of documents that revealed a decades-long conspiracy. Mrs. Reynolds had been altering records, manipulating HOA votes, and even misusing funds to construct a private beach cabana, an extravagant project funded by our HOA fees, but built on what was legally my property. One night, unable to sleep, I walked down the beach, the one soothing sound of waves now a constant reminder of the chaos that had taken over my life. I saw construction crews working in the dark, their blueprints spread out under harsh floodlights, trying to finalize the foundation of a structure that would permanently alter the landscape of my beloved shore. I knew that I couldn't let them continue. The next day, my attorney filed for an emergency injunction, and the judge, after reviewing our compelling evidence, ordered an immediate halt to all construction on my property. But the battle was far from over. The HOA retaliated by ramping up fines and further publicizing their community plans. The media caught wind of the story, and soon my private dispute became a headline. Reporters arrived at my door, microphones in hand, and questions poured in about community rights and property ownership. I found myself caught in a whirlwind of public scrutiny and legal challenges that seemed designed to wear me down. During one particularly heated community meeting, the room was charged with raw emotion. Neighbors who once sided with the HOA began to question their own understanding of the situation. A respected elder, who had witnessed the evolution of Seacliff shores for over 4 decades, came forward with a statement that turned the tide. "I remember when private beach access was a luxury," she said softly, her voice trembling with the weight of her memories. "The previous owner never built a path like this. We were always told our fees went toward community benefits, not personal profit." Her words resonated deeply, and slowly, more residents started to voice their support for my position. In a dramatic climax, during another town hall meeting, a flash drive was discreetly passed to one of the board members, an undeniable piece of evidence linking Mrs. Reynolds, her husband, and Coastal Developments to an elaborate scheme to commandeer private property for their own financial gain. The drive contained emails, secret recordings, and detailed plans for the luxury condo project. As the evidence was presented, the room erupted into chaos. Security guards stepped in, and amid the shouting and accusatory glares, Mrs. Reynolds made a hasty exit, leaving her plans and her reputation utterly in ruins. The aftermath was bittersweet. The legal battle continued for months, draining my savings and testing my resolve, but it also sparked a movement within our community. With the settlement money from the lawsuit against Mrs. Reynolds, the remaining HOA board, now reformed and led by Mr. Finch, a long-trusted resident who had finally stood up for what was right, approved the creation of a new, genuine community beach access point, located well away from my property. This compromise allowed for both community use and the preservation of individual property rights. In the quiet moments after the storm, as I walked along my now quiet beach path, I couldn't help but reflect on the whirlwind of events. I had fought against a powerful force that had tried to trample on my rights, and in doing so, I had unearthed a system riddled with corruption and greed. I learned that standing up for what is right often comes with a heavy price, but it also brings clarity and strength. My battle was not just about a piece of land. It was about integrity, community, and the belief that justice can prevail even in the face of overwhelming odds. So here I am today, sharing this story with you all in hopes that it serves as a reminder. Always verify your property records, never take anyone's claims at face value, and be prepared to fight for your rights. Because sometimes, the very people entrusted with your community's well-being may have secrets that can shake your world. And if my experience taught me anything, it's that even when you feel isolated and outnumbered, the truth has a way of shining through and winning in the end. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it inspires you to always stand up for what's yours and to question the narrative, no matter how convincing it might seem at first glance. Stay vigilant, stay strong, and remember, sometimes your private paradise is worth fighting for.